welcome to a show where you will hear about how our liberty is being eroded by the very people that swear an oath to protect it.
Today, the president signed a big new anti-terrorism bill that would expand the government's ability to track down terrorists, but at some cost.
On this show, we will discuss many of the lies that the government that hates us, by the way, we will discuss the lies that the people in positions of power and influence spread every day.
And what is the best way to confuse children? Confuse them about their sexuality, confuse them about their gender, expose them to things that their little brains are not ready for yet. That is how they are confusing children. It is leading to chaos, and Big Daddy government, of course, can be there to pick us all up and take care of us at the end of it.
We will also talk about how current elected leadership at all levels of government has been corrupted by power and control, as well as discuss the types of leadership needed to correct our republic's course.
We the people. Well, it's time to remember that we the people are the government.
Providing assistance for the Ukrainians to defeat the Russians, that's the number one priority for the United States right now.
I am your host, Larry Linton, retired U.S. Navy Command Master Chief and prior Tennessee House of Representatives District 12 candidate, and welcome to the Liberty, Leadership, and Lies podcast. Welcome to this week's show, ladies and gentlemen, the wrap-up to the interview with Miss Aundrea Gomez. Much as we did last week, I will let you hear from the show's sponsor, Anchor.fm, to minimize the interruption during the wrap-up to this wonderful interview.
If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Welcome back. As I stated in the beginning, Miss Aundrea Gomez joins the podcast again this week in part 2 of the interview to talk about the lies in the arena of government education. So let's welcome back Aundrea and get on with the rest of the interview.
Okay, number 8, social emotional learning is just character development and self-management.
Yeah, okay.
So social emotional learning is really the Trojan horse that has brought Marxism into our education system. And this has been going on for many years. And it's the social emotional learning is also tied into the technology that the kids have access to, the surveys, the data mining, the collecting of data from our children, to be able to then use that information to feed it back to kids in order to shape them into thinking collectively the way the Marxist education system wants them to think. So it's not, if you think about like character development, like, we want you to be able to make good decisions and be kind towards others. Those are all great things. But when you're looking at it through this global worldview, this global citizen worldview, it's very much a Marxist communist worldview. Do we have time for more?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So let's see. Number 9, science is the only form of knowledge and is always right. Evolution is a fact.
Oh, okay. That's why it's called the theory of evolution, because it hasn't been proven yet.
Right, but you see in education how they teach it. They don't teach it as a theory, and they don't balance it with teaching both sides. If they don't teach creationism and evolution and then allow students to come to their own conclusion.
Right, and because that's one of the roles that they're really started. I mean, that's where the church abdicated its responsibility in the lives of every American decades ago, is what I believe. But when the government started teaching this evolution vice creation, they did it with a goal in mind, Because if the people don't believe in a creator, who are they going to turn to in rough times?
Exactly.
The government.
Yeah. Yep. Got to remove God from everything, destroy the family. Government becomes the parent. But the other side of it is that ultimately the big lie is that you get to become God.
Right.
And that's what we get into with the whole, transgender and all of that movement.
Right.
All right. Number 10. This is where we're starting to, I guess, get a little bit controversial. You must go to college to be successful.
Oh, I love Mike Rowe.
Oh, right. Dirty Jobs.
Yeah,
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The trades.
He's done a lot to dispel this. Yeah.
Yeah, the trades are what built this country and are what going to maintain this country if we ever get off on this. College education is the end-all, be-all. I mean, because what is your master's degree in underwater basket weaving ever going to provide you? Nothing.
More indoctrination.
Right.
Yeah, so I actually have to admit that I used to believe this lie.
Oh, same here. That's why I made sure my daughter went to college. Yeah, I paid for the college, but it is a huge lie.
It is, and really, I think this has a negative impact on kids in a lot of ways. Number one, not everyone wants to go to college. Not everybody is in a mindset of wanting to go to another 4 years of schooling when they get out. They graduate high school at 18, and then the idea of turning and spending 4 or 6 or 8 more years in school is very unappealing. We all are gifted differently. And we have different skills and abilities. And some people are really good at using their hands to build things, to make things, to design things. And so for those kids that, they want to spend a few years in the workforce before they go on, but they're fed this lie that they should just go straight out of high school and go into college. And if they don't, there's something wrong with them, or they're a loser somehow. Is very discouraging. So I think you see a lot of kids try to make that transition into college, and it just doesn't work out for them.
And it ends up doing more damage to their self-esteem than it otherwise not going.
It does. I agree.
And then you got to look into the government aspect of that, because who finances really college education now? The federal government. They subsidize all federal loans, right? Because most of the private lenders are no longer giving student loans that aren't backed by the federal government. And that's why we see this huge student debt argument going on in our world right now. I mean, back in the 70s, a college education would have cost you about $1,000 a semester at a good school. But as soon as government put itself in there, it's the third-party payer, right? The price goes up and up and up because the government will guarantee the loan. And then so the citizen, once again, is on the hook and owes to the government because they subsidize their loans. It's another method of control.
Yep, and redistributing money. Absolutely. Okay, so along the lines of that one is your child must go to pre-K to be successful.
It wasn't around when I grew up.
It wasn't a thing. I consider pre-K to be daycare. I know that's probably controversial. A lot of people think that that's the first thing they need to do is get their kid in a really good preschool. I 100% disagree. I do understand many families function off of both parents working. I think that's dangerous. And that's probably very controversial as well. But I think the best place for your child at 3 and 4 years old is with a parent, with a person that loves them and is there to protect them. And the learning that can be done, just having conversations with your child, playing games and puzzles, or taking a walk, or whatever it is that you like to do, the vocabulary and the relationship building. You can teach your child all of their letters, their colors, their numbers, all in sign language and in English if you want to, before they go to kindergarten, and then have a much stronger relationship with your child because of it. So I'm not a huge fan of pre-K programs.
And again, where did pre-K programs come from?
Probably communists.
Or the government, right? The government,
the state, yeah.
Yeah. When the state does that, it's trying to get earlier control of your child. The early developmental years, when it's so important that parents bond with their child, when they're learning the world, now it's left up to the government. And what are you going to get when you got your child's upbringing left up to a government that doesn't care for them, but just sees them as a resource?
You're going to get an activist child.
Right.
A woke activist is what you're going to get if the government is in charge, for sure. And the next one is right along with the woke activist mindset, which is the lie is celebrating your success is bragging and makes other kids feel bad. So we see this, and I've seen this for years, where we used to put a little chart up in the classroom that as students learned, let's say, for example, their multiplication tables, that's what they're working on. Let's say when they earned their ones, they got to sign their name. And then when they earned their twos, they got, another little sticker or something by their name. And then, so on and so forth. So you're publicly displaying the names of students and showing that they are achieving something, and you're celebrating that. Well, this started years ago where that was like a big no-no. You can't do that because it makes other kids feel bad. So then we stopped putting up anything in the classroom that showed any sort of achievement at all. You were not allowed to celebrate anything. And then just recently, I think it was a Virginia high school, I might be wrong on that, there were some students that performed exceptionally well on a standardized test, and they functioned, or they performed so well, they could have gotten money and, college scholarship and entrance to some really good schools because of that. And the school neglected to even tell the students that they achieved that level, and they lost out on the funding and the admission because they didn't even know.
Yep, you're right. It was a Virginia school district that did that. I think one particular school did it. And you're right. I mean, this notion that rewarding people makes other people feel bad. I'm a big proponent. I'm a leadership coach, and I talk leadership, power bases, and influence tactics. And one of the best influence tactics a leader can have, it comes from your reward power. The ability to reward good behavior. Because when you reward good behavior or high performing behavior, what do you get more of? You get more
behavior you rewarded. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that does spur on others to get that, because every human being likes to get a pat on the head. Everyone does. Regardless if they tell you they're a big meanie or a sourpuss or whatever, everybody likes to get told that they're doing a good job. Every human being does. So when you reward that, it gets them to continue to strive to get that, and it spurs others around them to get it. But when you stop rewarding good behavior, what happens? Well, you've plateaued that behavior. And we know with normal currents in society and culture, if behavior's plateaued, it will be eroded. It's just like geology. If you don't reward it, it gets eroded. And that's what we get here.
We get mediocre across the board.
Yeah.
We get more mediocre. Yep, absolutely. All right, let's see. I don't know if you're ready for the next one.
I'm always
Well,
ready.
this one I think is easy. School choice will destroy public education and hurt minorities.
I'm going to cheer for destroying public education, but it's false that it hurts minorities. In fact, if school choice actually helps minorities.
That's right, it does. And obviously, we already know that public ed has already been destroyed. The building is on fire. Providing school choice funding gives parents the financial incentive to rescue their child from the burning building.
Absolutely. Again, it kind of erodes that third party payer by putting the money actually back in the parents' hands to figure out where to send their child to get a better education.
That's right. Okay, now I'm going to give you, I have two more, and they're both pretty controversial.
Okay.
You ready?
Sure.
All right. The next one is teachers should get paid more.
Teachers go into their positions knowing what their pay is going to be.
Now, I'm a former teacher, remember?
Right.
And there have been times where I felt like I wasn't getting paid enough. So I don't make this as a blanket statement across the board.
Right.
I do think that there are teachers out there that deserve to be paid more.
Absolutely.
Because they are changing, they're changing hearts. They're impacting kids positively. They're inspiring kids to strive and grow. And there are teachers that deserve to pay to earn more money.
And that's where that reward power base comes into play. If there is some teacher doing that, pay them for what they're worth. But keeping salaries the same across the board for high performing teachers and the mediocre teachers, you're doing a disservice to the good teachers and what happens to their behavior. Again.
Yeah, why stay late and spend extra time planning for your lessons when you see other teachers, walking out with their students when the bell rings?
Right. Joe Poop, the rag man right down the hall that just shows up and just sits in the desk while the students are there, is getting paid the same amount as you while your students are much higher performing? Absolutely not. So teachers should be paid based upon performance.
They should. And then you also have to remember that, at least in Tennessee, there are 200 working days in a teacher contract. So if you take their pay and divide it by the 200 days, you come up with a daily rate. And then if you wanted to figure out, well, what if that teacher did work a full year like some other employee, it would be about 240 days. So there's about 40 days a year that they're not working, that if you worked in, say, retail or some other industry. So you could make more if you worked 40 more days, right, at another job. And that would change the annual income of a teacher. But and I have ideas about a year-round system where teachers could actually make a little bit more money. But I think in general, this idea that we give more money to the school system because our teachers, and that's kind of the ploy, right? Is, we got to pay our teachers more. We need to support them and they deserve more money and they're so hardworking. But then, so we pay more. We think what we're giving is going to go to the teachers and it doesn't. It ends up building up their central office.
Right. The administrators, the people that are not involved in the day-to-day interaction with your children, they should definitely not be paid more than a teacher.
Yeah. No, they shouldn't, and there are way too many coaches in public education today. So these are, most likely a former classroom teacher. They've moved into a coaching role, and they're supposed to be meeting with teachers, coaching teachers, and then working with small groups of students. I didn't always see a lot of that going on in my experience. It could be different elsewhere. But you have a lot of, coaches, they're getting paid what teachers are getting paid, but they're not in a classroom with 20 to 30 students depending on them for every minute of the day. It's a very different role. They're doing a lot more like scheduling and grouping of students and so on and so forth. And yet they're getting a teacher pay. So there's, I think, some wasteful spending going on because we're trying to make education so complicated. And if we just went back to the basics, I think we'd be a whole lot better off. Right.
It goes back to my original or my statement earlier that there is nothing so well designed to waste our money than the government.
That's right. Okay, here's the big one.
Okay.
God doesn't belong in schools.
Well, absolutely does. But see, here's where I'm going to take a little bit of a different stance on that. God does belong in schools, but if we were to do that right now, who are we going to have introducing children to God in schools if we were to do it right now?
That's a really good point. Absolutely. It depends, I think, on where you are. I know where I am, and I think where you are, you probably do have a lot of Christian teachers. But I think if we just were to allow the 10 Commandments to be taught in our public schools, I think we would see a drastic improvement. Right, across the board.
Because that moral law is already written on our hearts. I mean, every human being has that already written on our hearts. But to see it reinforced in a public place would do leaps and bounds better than anything that the government could introduce.
Absolutely. And, there is no subject that you can study, from math to science, literature, art, architecture, music. There is no subject that isn't touched by God and isn't influenced by Jesus Christ.
Absolutely. I mean, all things come from the Creator, but that is, again, why government needs to get the Creator out of the American people's psyche. They have to have government replace the Creator.
And that's what gets us to the Marxist social activist curriculum that we have today.
Right.
It's taken 100 years, and
it's picking up speed exponentially.
Yeah, it really is. I think that obviously, a lot of people credit COVID for opening a lot of parents' eyes because their kids were home and they were on the Chromebook, and the parents were able to see more of what was going on and what their kids are being exposed to. But it didn't start then. This has been going on for a long time. The influence of this kind of Marxist communist theology has been there since the 1920s.
Absolutely. I believe our government really started its downhill trajectory in the 1910s, the decade of the 1910s.
With Woodrow Wilson?
Yep. Actually, when we started under Taft, when we started getting that 16th Amendment going, which again grew the size of government and influenced the income tax. So when you get access, first cut of every human being's money, because money really, our tax dollars, our sweat equity, that represents a lot of our ability to enjoy our freedoms. The less that we have, the government has control. But that's a whole other topic for a whole other day.
Yeah. That would be a good topic to discuss, though.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I've got, and I'm sure I'll come up with more later.
Well,
was that enough?
Oh, that was definitely enough. I enjoyed having you on. We definitely got to have you on about the topic of lies that the people are most believing and what we can do to counteract them. Because, like I said, it's increasing exponentially. And I've always said, or here recently, last few years now, homeschooling will save the republic, because we definitely have to get, if government has any tie to our education system, specifically the federal government, if they have any ties to it, it is definitely detrimental. I mean, Ronald Reagan had the opportunity. The GOP platform in 1980 was to abolish the Federal Department of Education. They had a golden opportunity to do that. So his second biggest failure, besides the 1986 Amnesty Act, is failing to abolish the Federal Department of Education. Because you see its tentacles everywhere, especially this Title IX fight about, boys and girls' bathrooms now.
Oh, right. And being tied to school lunches and yep.
Right. Because what better way to gain control of a population than to control the minds of their children?
Yep.
Absolutely.
And this is why, when I talk to activists across the state, election integrity is a huge priority. Education is a huge priority, and they really go hand in hand. I mean, everything does hinge on election integrity, and we could talk about that on another day as well, if you'd like. But even if we fixed election integrity and really cleaned that up, if we don't fix education, we haven't fixed anything. So, they just go hand in hand. They're the two most important issues for me to have some sort of an impact at the state level.
Absolutely, because Gary talked about it, and I studied a little bit about the Gen Z voting this last midterm. It was a huge voting block, and of what I call mentally challenged people, because they've been indoctrinated by a public school system that doesn't care about the individual, just cares about the collective. So that's what these Gen Zers are voting for, is more collectivism. Yeah. And it's only going to get worse until we take control of education.
Yes.
Teach the people that they are the true sovereign in our constitutional republic, so that they can make sure the government stays in its constitutionally limited bounds and enjoys more freedom.
So we can do a few things. Like you mentioned, we can move away from federal funding for education. for lots of things, but definitely for education. We can homeschool. That's huge. But there are parents who won't homeschool. So we do have to fix the public schools.
Right.
We do have to put the fire out. So I kind of picture being one of the people standing there trying to put the fire out on the school building while parents are running in and rescuing their kids.
That's a good way to look at it. And then grabbing a couple of kids on the way out and teach them that trade of putting out fires.
Exactly. Raise up the next generation of insubordinate fighters.
Absolutely.
Make Defiance cool again.
Yeah. Well, Aundrea, it was a real pleasure having you on the show today, and I'm trying to get the word out in advance of this being released that we got to get as many people to listen to what is actually happening and the lies that are actually being spread, not only by government, but by media, and then these lies that are being believed by parents that have children in public schools. There is a way to still fix it, and that's by being involved. Show up to like the boards of education meeting. I go to them quite regularly. If we show up and we let these elected officials know that first, they work for us. Second, that the school district is the parents, we can actually start to get a little bit of that putting the fire out by getting parents involved in fixing it at the local level. And the state level is going to take a whole different set of tactics. But yeah, we have to get federal funding separated. And there's a way that we could do that. I've listened to a little bit of the John Birch Society on how we could set aside federal funding that's into trust funds where the state actually does have control of it with no ties or requirements to meet by the federal government. Because it is, when it all boils right down to it, it is the citizens' money. It's not the government's, it's the citizens. So we all got to take control, and we really do appreciate people like you standing in the arena, mainly for our kids, and then through our kids, saving our republic.
I lost you right as you were saying getting people involved and engaged, going to school board meetings and so forth. And I 100% agree. And flip your school board.
Flip them.
Flip your
Absolutely.
school board. Yeah, flip your school board. Find like-minded people who would support having charter schools coming into your area. And that's the only way you're going to get charter schools is if you have a school board that supports it. Absolutely.
And we're working that here in Sevier County, and I think there's a couple of good candidates that are on the horizon for next year's election that I'm going to fully support them. So we got to get control of that, people, because right now our school boards don't even listen to us. They barely tolerate us being there. Here recently, they've even ordered all their principals to attend their monthly meeting. I think it's a show of force to fill up the room, so there's very little parent attendance now.
And to make it confrontational for parents to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. And most parents aren't going to be confrontational because they just care about what's going into their kids' heads. But the school board won't answer any questions.
No, they won't.
Yep.
They won't. They just blank stares.
Well, once again, Aundrea, thank you for coming on. I'm sure we'll get together again here soon about some more election integrity, and I hope to get you on the show for the election integrity part of your activism.
All right. Well, I would love to do that.
All right. Well, thank you for calling, and we'll talk at you later.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That wraps up the interview, ladies and gentlemen. For more information about this or any other show, please visit the website of libertyleadershipandlies.com. If you have any questions or requests, you can email me directly from the webpage. Before we close, we have this week's wisdom from God's Word, and it comes to us from Proverbs 22:6. Start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. Government is actually trying to do that with the children, and it has been going on for generations now. It is the parents' authority, accountability, and responsibility to raise their children in the way they should go. Government education is not an equal partner in this endeavor. They are definitely not the primary entity responsible for the whole child, although they would like it to be so. Thank you all for listening this week, and I pray that you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Until next week, stand in the arena with me. Reveille, it's time to wake up.